And welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This week, I get to have a sit-down conversation with one of the most important people in the New Brunswick music scene, and that is none other than Jean Surette. He is the Executive Director of Musique New Brunswick. He is the drummer for Les Païens and UmLäb. So we get to have a conversation. Of course, we get into his roots and where it all kind of started for him musically. But we also talk about his very improvised style in playing. I guess that would come from a bit of his background in jazz. But we also talk about the process that Les Païens did when they recorded their last two albums, Carte Blanche and Carte Noire, which totally blew my mind. So we talk about the state of the music industry in New Brunswick, kind of pre-COVID, post-COVID, kind of where things are going, how they see certain things changing, both good and bad. And we also talk about our love for Tolkien, Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and all things that are Middle-earth, which was definitely a highlight for me. Hope you all enjoy my conversation with Jean Surette. How you doing?
Good. How's the audio?
Oh, sounds great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I can hear you clear as day. Yeah.
What?
The video's good too. I'm doing great. Pretty good. All things considered, the circuit breakers and trying to get a band together to practice. That one guy lives in Moncton and can't get out of there. So it's been interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, I hear you. No, we were hoping to practice this Wednesday, like yesterday. And I was like, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And then you got another guy in the band who his daughter who's at primary school, and in her class, she hasn't gone to school in 2 weeks. So he's like staying at home with her. And so it's like, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Strange times we live in, man.
No, totally.
Yeah. We'll get through it though. I'm confident.
Oh yeah,
we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough right now because October and November sometimes are tougher times of the year too.
Yeah, that's true.
I find.
Yeah.
So it's like the energy level's down, and there's not as much sunlight and all that stuff. So
yeah, but daylight savings time and holidays coming up, and people are stressing out about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the Musique New Brunswick Awards went off pretty well. I got to watch that online. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it was the second year we do something online. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different beast compared to a live show with an audience and figuring out, how many tickets are sold and capacity of the room and all that stuff, and wrangling presenters. And in this case, it was like, okay, this is the team and that's all it is. And then trying to make for a good online on-screen show. Last year we were lucky to have Kevin McIntyre produce the show and give us his expertise, because he had worked in, not Kevin McIntyre the drummer, but Kevin McIntyre. But so last year we actually learned a lot. I learned a lot from Kevin, and this year tried to put a little bit of that into the show, but we knew that we had a solid presenter, like a solid host with David Miles and Stephen Lewis and the crew at Marshall Studios doing the production itself. I think that's the first time they were doing something as, I don't know, as not as complex as that, and as robust as being, you're going live. You've got a lot of cameras happening. You've got pre-tape stuff, and I think it was a fun show. We always said that our awards are like a family reunion. We don't want it to be too stuffy. We want it to be fun, and I think we pulled that off.
Yeah, no, it was great. And last year's too, with Dawn hosting, with all those wardrobe changes, and I thought it was great. And I think like doing it online, it allows people that are outside of the area where it's being hosted, because usually it's in a different city every year. It allows other members to be able to tune in and watch, where they might not necessarily be able to get a ticket and go. With that, it's online, so it's free, so you're not getting the ticket sales. Did you guys think about doing that kind of like a paid online type of a thing to get in to watch the show?
We didn't. Last year we thought, let's make this, well, especially last year because we were in the thick of the pandemic, and we figured, this is more of a community thing. Let's put it out there and make it free. And it actually never occurred to us to try to sell tickets this year. I think that there's a lot of conversations right now on what the pandemic has done to free content online. The perception that there's a lot of free stuff out there, or what is perceived as free things, and it didn't. I think because the awards is a community, not a strictly community thing. It's an industry thing where we celebrate albums and activity and events. But I think we really wanted for the artists and the folks that did interesting things in the last year to be celebrated and seen by as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And to put it behind a ticketing paywall, one, you're going to get less people involved watching, and two, it will not live online. Now, if someone wants to go back and see portions or all of the awards, they still can do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's important. So no, it didn't really. I think that's a different discussion on how people are. We like to go see shows. I mean, we're missing to go see shows.
Yeah.
But there's a whole portion of the society anyway in North America that maybe I hope not. I haven't got too accustomed to getting free content all the time.
Yeah. That's spoiled. A lot of kids are spoiled now with everything being just available at the click of a button, you know, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or any of the streaming services, I remember, saving money to buy a record that I knew was coming out, before it was released. And then, you go down and you buy it, and then you just consume it over and over again because, you spent your hard-earned money on it. Now it's just, click of a button. No, next. Like, I don't think I could handle that. Like,
it's a whole different way of, like you said, consuming music. I've got two teenagers, and they're used to having everything literally at their fingertips. And I make sure they know that, I pay X amount of money every month, so you guys have access to that, and they know that. But my daughter recently, I'd say in the last 8 months or so, has gotten into vinyl because I'm into vinyl.
Yes.
She's into vinyl not necessarily for crate diving, but she's a big Billie Eilish fan, she's got her favorite artists, and she likes having that physical format. It's something that gets her closer to her artist, the artist that she loves. And that's I see I really relate to that. I think we both do, like where we're waiting for that album to come out, we race to the record store, we buy it, we've saved our money and we listen to it over and over. Well, they've already listened to the music over and over and over, but having that, there's something comforting knowing that my kids see value in that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean,
they don't,
as people, we're tactile. Like, there's a reason why we have all of our senses, like touch being one of them, being able to see it. So you look at the album art, you touch the physical copy, and with vinyl especially, you have to be careful, and you pull it out of the sleeve and set it onto the turntable and drop the needle. All those things add to the experience. And like I collect vinyl. I'm not nearly on your level with my vinyl collection, but I've only recently started in the last probably 5 years getting back into it, just because I didn't have a record player until then. And I remember my son, who's also a teenager, he came home one day and I was putting on a record, and he was like, what's that? So just a total different generation, right? Of what they saw growing up from when they were kids into, what they see now. It's
absolutely. Yeah. No, there's an interesting resurgence, and then, like vinyl is one thing and cassettes are another. Like that, I was never, not I wasn't a fan of cassettes, but cassettes were handy. They were, what I liked about cassettes is that you could make your own mixtapes. And I found that was really, I explained to my kids once, like, when I wanted to get one song, I wouldn't necessarily go out and buy the record. I'd wait on and at the radio and press pause, and wouldn't always have the beginning of the song. We wouldn't have the end of the song, but I'd
Those
have
damn
most of the song.
DJs that would just talk too much into the intro.
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So talking about kids and what they were experiencing, what was it like for you? Like we'll go all the way back. So where
Sure.
are you originally from? Like, are you from the Moncton area?
Yep, I grew up in Moncton. I wasn't born here, but I grew up here. My parents were away. They're both from Moncton. My dad was studying. Excuse me.
Yeah.
My dad. I'm from a big family. I'm the sixth of seven. Like I feel like a Borg, six of seven. But
we'll get into some of that stuff later too.
Yeah. So I grew up in Moncton. I went to a small school that I would, considering today's reality, I walked quite a ways to get to that school. Went to a small school called Essex, and went to Vanier and then Mathieu Martin. Grew up in Moncton and in downtown pretty much. We would spend we had a cottage out in Shedek Bridge. So in the summer, I spent my summers pretty much as soon as school ended right until a couple of days before out in country. So my summers were in the country and the rest of the time was in downtown Moncton.
Okay. So being a big family, I have two siblings, so it wasn't a big family, but my mom is one of 16 brothers and sisters. So if that big family dynamic, and growing up, kitchen parties like every weekend at one of the aunts or uncles, or usually, well, I guess my grandparents until my grandfather passed away, and then it went from his house to a couple of uncles and they were all musicians. So 3 or 4 electric or acoustic guitars and a violin and a mandolin, and everyone was just sitting there tapping their feet, all in the Acadian way, and so was that something that was part of your childhood?
Not at all.
No.
It's funny. My story is very musical in the sense that both my parents were huge music fans. My mother was in choirs, and she was a big fan of the she knew all the classic songs from the movies, and from she could hum anything. My dad was a huge fan of la chanson française, so like either from Quebec or France, so like Edith Piaf, and not only that repertoire, but also big classical fan and jazz as well. But since I had older siblings and they had grown up as teenagers in the 70s, I was surrounded by Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and the Beatles and Harmonium, and so I'm not at all on the trad side, but a lot in the 70s rock and chanson. And we had, like a lot of families, you had the big, huge that big record player that made of wood, but you'd flip the top up, and there was a
top.
The records was in the record player. Sometimes an 8-track. We didn't have an 8-track, but there was a radio in there too. So and and all the stacks of vinyl in front. So in those stacks, there was all sorts of music. And I think that's where I get my musical culture. Not only the music that was always kind of blaring in the background, because my dad was a really big fan of not only music, but that it would sound good. So we'd have a really good sound system. And so I would go through there and pick out, there's some odd, like one of my Desert Island discs is the White Album. And it's an odd album, it's in the sense that it's eclectic. There's all sorts of music on there. And there's a lot of albums like that. Then thinking back, it's like, well, I wonder why those albums, like I used to listen to Ummagumma by Pink Floyd, and that's another odd, but so there are some albums that have always been in kind of the background. And the influence of my parents and my sisters and my brothers came through the records, but not necessarily. I'm the only actual musician in the family.
I was going to ask if anyone else played. Yeah.
My sister did some piano. My mother, like I say, my dad played trumpet in the band when he was a kid, but never more than that. So I'm really the only one that actually kept at it.
Okay. So what do you think was the reason for, like, what gave you that itch to be a performer?
I don't know. I think the itch wasn't necessarily to perform; it was to play drums. I remember I didn't start with drums. My mom wanted me to take violin. At the time, I was like 5 years old. There was a program called the Suzuki program, I think it was called, for very young children. And so I did 2 or 3 years. It didn't really connect with me, but later in junior high, I had I played the clarinet, and then after that the bass clarinet. In ninth grade, I had been eyeing the drums for a while. I've been like, oh, I like these things. I've never played them before, but I think I really like them.
Yeah.
And I remember clearly, there were some friends of ours that for a whole summer, one of the friends of the family had left a drum set in the basement, and I caught wind of that. And so when my mom was visiting with the friends, they, oh, can I come? So I remember going down and actually sitting behind the drum set for the first time. And I don't even remember what they were, but I just remember, okay, I need to do this. And it was working.
Yeah. So pretty
and
coordinated
that was
then, yeah.
That was the first time. And then after that, it was like, okay, I want a drum set. And I really, I basically was saying, look, I want a drum set and this and that. And finally I got a practice pad. So, all right, I'll take the pad. And I whacked that thing for at least a year, doing air drumming while listening to Rush and different things. And finally I got a kit the summer of grade 9. And I still have parts of that kit, not a lot of them, but I still have parts. But that was like, and like you're saying, why did I want to be a performer? It didn't really occur to me that I wanted to perform. I just wanted to play drums and learn songs. And I was just so much into the music I was listening to, and I wanted to play that. And I was really into the Police and Rush and Pink Floyd and later on Zappa. But I guess the performing side came later. It maybe closer to university. I think the first time I played in front of people on my drums was in high school, where I was supposed to play with a band, and in the end, everyone decided that they weren't into it anymore. So I did a solo. It was like a La Boîte à Chanson, and I think so it's weird. The performance side came later.
Yeah. So you're very comfortable behind the kit in who you are as a player, because of those days of just kind of practicing on your own and developing your vocabulary, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. The vocabulary came, and that's important. When I used to teach, before I was working with MNB, I used to teach I had a lot of students. And one of the things I used to tell them is, like, play as much different music as you can, put some headphones on, be careful of your hearing, but put some headphones on and play what you hear. And that's what I did. I learned a lot of music, and I'd play a lot of music. I'd get home from school every day, and I'd play till basically my dad got home, so that was like a couple of hours every day. And I had a kettle blaster right here, and some old headphones and so I think that's super important to create that vocabulary because then that your personality will come out later. It's the combination of all those drummers that I've listened to all my life. Obviously the ones that were earlier on, the Stuart Copelands, Neil Peart, Nick Mason, Ringo Starr, and the list goes on. All
Vinnie
those
Colaiuta.
drummers. Vinny, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And Terry Bozzio was another big one. And Bill Bruford too, big one.
Yeah.
And so those drummers each gave me a little bit of something, and sometimes a little more something. And I still hear to this day, something I'll do, like, oh, geez, that's so Bruford, or just the way I play my rim shots. It's like, and that's important. And I think I'm hope to think that after all that, there's some sort that I've created my own personal language or my own personal accent, in my language when I play.
Yeah, there's definitely like, and that's why I love all different genres of music, because you can hear in everyone's playing sort of where they come from, their backgrounds, and that's what makes us all special. Like we all speak the same language, but we all have our own accent. Like it's just like, in Moncton and Acadian communities, like we speak French, but we don't speak the same French that they speak in Quebec or that they speak in France, or same thing with like any language really. Like it's all in your regions. And I think as musicians and especially drummers, we definitely have our own vocabulary when it comes to playing.
Yeah, it's not only this is something that only really occurred to me later. When I say later, maybe 10, 15 years ago, it's not only the vocabulary of what you're playing, but it's also what you choose to play. The drum you choose to play, the size of the drum, the skin you put on, the tuning, the placement of where the things are, how you muff or not, how open are the skin tones or not. I think in the last, I'd say 5-6 years, I've been really digging, putting towels or different sounds on the toms or on the drums for specific songs or specific moments. And for a long time, it was like the drums have to sing, they have to be open, they have to ring. And you listen to songs like, it's a classic, but Come Together by the Beatles, what made Ringo or the producer, whoever thought of it, to put some towels on the toms, like to have that, have that sound. And I'm really into that lately.
Like the production side of like how to create the sounds themselves, not so much playing them, but just how you make that sound.
And changing them from one song to another, that it's not just, your drums will sound all the same all the time. And sometimes we don't have enough time to do those changes in a show. And but that's something that I've been really, I'd say the beginning of the pandemic kind of forced me, and a lot of us for that matter, to think outside the box. Like, okay, well, geez, we have a lot of time on our hands. Let's do some stuff. Let's play around, experiment. And I definitely did that.
Well, it's something I found, like I've been listening to your albums in preparation for talking with you tonight, and I find that each song kind of has its own spot on the album. Like there's different sounds that are coming out, and like just the whole atmosphere of each song is different. How when you're making and writing those songs, because I mean I play in a punk band, so it's just 100% go, right? Drums are wide open, guitars are loud, like it's just part of the genre. But what you guys are creating, there's a lot more intricacy in the sounds that you're using. And I'm just curious, like as the drummer, who I'm guessing when you're playing live, you're in control of a lot of those samples and a lot of those sounds, kind of like a musical director. How do you, when you're writing the songs, come up with those different pieces that'll fit together?
Well, it's a good question. It all depends on the album you're referring to, because I was actually thinking of that last week, and if you're referring to Les Païens anyway, Les Païens. we were and still are, we still exist. We're still a thing. We're just not doing anything. But just to say,
as most of us are,
So we rely heavily on improvisation. Some albums were more written than others. So if you take that first CD or the first, depending where your starting point is, if you take the first CD, which was an EP phoned, mostly live, there were some songs in there. But if you go a little bit later, let's say an album like Zern to Turn, which is a super eclectic album, again, mostly live with some studio wonderment. A lot of different atmospheres, a lot of different vibes. And so we're, if it's got a kind of a reggae yet really hard hitting feel, well, I think the drums have to be fairly simple and straight to the point, but they've got to, that's where the Stuart Copeland comes in, you know, so it's like, you know, and that's my role, you know, whereas there are other songs, let's say if you go a little further down the road where we had the their two last albums, which are Carte Blanche and Carte Noire.
Yeah.
Carte Blanche and Carte Noire were recorded at the same time.
Oh, really?
They were done on the same during 2 weekends. We went into the studio in Grand Barachois with Georges Béliveau and producer Andy Cregan, and we had about 6 compositions that were solid, that had forms, that we knew what we were going to be playing. And then we also knew that we were going to be improvising quite a bit, that we just go in and improvise. So no starting point, just come. I don't think there may have been one that we'd say, oh, that riff, remember, let's do that again. Okay. So we recorded about 3 hours of improvisation in there. And there are some compositions that came out of those improvs, because as a band, we developed a language internally that was that we were very perceptive of what the other is going to do. And so we were able to create forms on the spot and go into directions together sometimes.
Really?
And so there are some songs that you think are compositions, but they're actually drawn from improvisations.
I would have never guessed that.
And then, but I have to say that Andy Cregan would take, let's say, a 9-minute improv and then cut the fat, and it would become a 4-minute song.
Okay.
But the themes are there, like this is a very clear theme. Mm-hmm. This is a very clear bass and drum part with a melody on top, which goes here. We all did that together, improvising there. Yeah. But then Andy would kind of fix it that it's smoother. There may be a smoother transition. There may be one element that he brings out. There may be another element that he may loop a little bit, but the musical context and the musical ideas and the form are all improvised. So, and that, like the title track, Septembre, total improvisation. So that's where our instincts come into play, where everything that I was doing came from instinct on what was going on either in the loops that maybe Jonah was playing, because at that point I wasn't doing anything electronic with Les Païens. I was a complete acoustic player. Yeah. Now with UmLäb, that's changed, where I have a hybrid kit where I include an acoustic kit, but I also have one of these. And also have a foot pad that for my bass drum and a snare, so I can actually play a full electronic kit or mix and match. So it's a much different deal, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. So what you're referencing to is like, okay, those choices of sounds compared to acoustic are much more in play than they were with Les Païens. But I think with Les Païens, I rely a lot on my instincts and what the others are doing, and making sure that I don't, because that's a 5-piece, and you could maybe appreciate this having played probably in bigger bands, where if you're 5 in a band, it's a big difference between 4. Mm-hmm. You know, what's going on, how much activity is happening. So it's really important that, especially if you want to go into more subtle moments, sometimes it's important just not to play. Yeah. And that's not all drummers or musicians in general catch that idea, and it's important.
Yeah. And I find the lack of sound makes it sound that much bigger, right? That space is what makes it have that weight, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you have a new album coming out?
We do. We have a album coming out. We started as an ensemble, as a band, basically came out of the ashes of Les Païens. So 4 of the band members, we decided, hey, let's give a crack at it. And we really wanted to do something, obviously it's still electronic, kind of jazz rock, not quite prog, but proggy stuff, but not quite, you know. So we started this in February of 2020. So if you do your calculations, about a month later, everything went to crap. Yeah. But we were able to continue jamming and record a bunch of stuff. And it's funny, the process that we used for Carte Noire and Carte Blanche. And by the way, Carte Noire is 100% improv. There is nothing on that album that was preconceived.
that just makes that album much. I mean, I was already impressed with the album, but that just makes it that much more like, holy shit. Like,
I mean, obviously there's a little bit of editing, a little, mixing.
Yeah,
but
edits aside, but there's still like, yeah, like I'd like to hear the full without any cuts. Like that'd be an amazing piece to as
those
a B-side.
Those pencil mixes, as Andy used to call them, still exist. We still have the full. I'll have to send those to you so you can listen to the unedited versions. It's pretty cool. Crazy. Yeah. So, but to come back with the UmLäb, we have a lot of the same process where we improvise, and we capture those, and we're lucky enough to be jamming in Jonah's basement, and he had full on multi-track and multi-camera. So there's some of those sessions where we actually multicammed it, just because he had the gear. But we recorded it. We listened to stuff. We said, "Oh, this is a really good. Let's do a little bit of editing on our own," and because we do everything on click, not just click, but on grid, where everyone's MIDI. Everyone is on the clock. So that means when it comes to editing, it's super easy. It's super easy to take stuff out or to move things around. So we did a lot of recording during 2020, and then started piecing stuff together, and I'd say in the spring of 2021, and started mixing. Andy is also included in the process. Mostly the process was that we record, we do a first edit and give the stems to Andy. Andy takes those stems and does a bunch of stuff with them, edits a little bit more, adds some elements, and sends us back the stems. And that's what we mix. And then from there, we're waiting. We've received our masters. So our it's going to be a 5-song EP. Well, we're not calling it an EP. It's just a 5-song album. And they're not songs, actually. They're all instrumental. And we'll be releasing. We're working on the plan right now, how we want to release it. But what we'd like to do is release it with some video content that we recorded, that we've gotten edited, that we're waiting on the edits right now, when we do release it, that we have a marketing strategy around getting people to follow us on Spotify and following us on Instagram. And it'll be an Instagram story marketing plan. Trying to get people to follow us and to like us and stuff like that. But it's an interesting way of working, where you're not, we're learning the improvs that we created. So
because like doing it in the studio improv, that's free form and great, and you capture it, then you got to learn it.
Exactly. Yeah.
To be able to
which isn't always. I know for Carte Noire it wasn't an easy thing. And when we released Carte Noire, it was we tried to play every song on the album mostly, and some of them were really difficult. It wasn't that it was technically difficult, but it was just trying to get those moments. Because a lot of the time it's the textures, it's the silence, it's when certain things have to happen, and because they happen kind of naturally in the improvisation, it's hard to recreate that. And so that was a real challenge. And with UmLäb, it's slightly, I'd say it's a bit more straightforward, in the sense that we had a bit more time to rehearse, but it's a lot of the same kind of process. But we're looking forward, hopefully this winter, we want to get together and just hunker down for a couple of days and actually write, because that's something we actually do want to do. We have there are a couple of tunes that are not on the EP that we actually do play live, because we've played 3 or 4 times now, and those are actually compositions where someone came with an idea, or that we jammed an idea, and then we really worked on the forms and worked on specifics about them. So that's something that we're looking forward to doing too.
That'd be interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Because I've been I've not heard a lot of your stuff until recently. I just haven't gotten around to it. I'm being honest. I don't get to listen to everything.
And we haven't pushed it.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, there's that too. But as soon as I heard it, I was like, okay, this is something different. This is a
Yeah.
vibe. This is an idea. This is something that can be transcending. It's almost like when you're watching a film and you hear the music in the background and you don't know why you're feeling certain ways until you pinpoint it. And I think the Carte Blanche and Carte Noire really captured that. Like
Hmm.
I was sitting there at work and I had it on my headphones and I was typing. And I was just like, what the fuck, man? This is something different. And I was down for it. So I, and I think that, like you say, with the free form and the other guys in the band, they're all solid players and they'd have to be, because you have to have that language, like you said, to know where the other person's going. And that only comes from experience and playing with people. So I mean,
Exactly.
how long were you guys together before you did those two albums?
Um, as a band, the Les Païens started in '94.
Mm-hmm.
So the core, Denis, Chops, and I were in the band as of '94. So the total span of the band until we stopped in 2019 was 25 years.
Yeah.
And then Sébastien came on board in 2001. So he was actually with us for a good 20 years. And then Jonah was with us as of 2000, I forget, but he was there for Carte Blanche and Carte Noire, but he had been in the band for, I'd say, 3 years before.
Yeah.
So we already had a really good internal musical language between the four of us. And Jonah came and brought in a lot of electronic elements and looping.
Yeah.
And kind of solidified that path. And so by the time we got to the recording of Carte Blanche and Carte Noire, we already had a pretty solid improvisational language together. And like Jonah used to say, it's like our last gig was always his favorite gig, or his last jam was always his favorite jam. And it was interesting to have someone new come into the band. And the same thing happened with Sébastien when he came in. When someone new comes in with new ideas, they inject new life into sometimes they inject new life into something that maybe has gotten not old, but sometimes you need a little bit of something to invigorate you.
Yeah, something fresh. Yeah.
Something fresh, exactly. So I think the electronics, which we were already dabbling in, because Sébastien had a what was that called again? It was a pad. It was a Korg. Anyway, he used to play beats in there. He'd use it for effects as well. And chaos pad, that's what it was. So he had two chaos pads at one point, doing beats and doing different things. And then when Jonah came in, he took care of a lot of the beats and a lot of those electronic sounds. And Sébastien could really concentrate on being the melodist, doing the trumpet and the flute and sometimes sax through these effects, but still, using those effects. So when Carte Noire and Carte Blanche were recorded, I think it was just perfect timing when it comes to our language coming together and our ears. That's not just a language. I mean, language, you have to hear a language most of the time. And, you don't need to hear a language, but in this case, the musical language that we had created was really laid out during the recordings, and we just kind of took the best moments. So those two albums are really sister albums. They were done at the same time.
Yeah, because like you say, when you're having a conversation, the two ways of a conversation is listening and speaking, right? So as musicians, you have to listen to each other, and it's a beautiful conversation. So kudos on that. And yeah, I was very impressed when I heard that, and especially with telling me how it was recorded.
Yeah, it's one of those things I'd like to lay out a bit more on how those two albums came about, because it's not a typical way of making an album at all.
Really isn't. Yeah. So you're the musical director, executive director of Musique New Brunswick, which it sounds fancy, sounds important. So, but what would be the easiest way to describe what that role is with MNB?
Well, I'm kind of when when we have events and we have a a pass, I always put the Grand Wazoo just because I like that album. But it's I think it's a role that there's a lot of different parts of that title. It's the person who needs to go in front of a camera and talk to a reporter. It's the person that needs to talk to government if they want to know what the industry needs, or if they want to understand how the industry works. If you have a new minister who's kind of doesn't know how things work, it's also someone who will hire the right person for the right job. If we have a person that we need to have for a certain role, I have to be able to know who would be right in that position. We have a board of directors. We have to, I'm never the one person that decides we're doing this, although sometimes I do need to make executive decisions, like this is our direction, this is what we need to be doing. But we're an organization, we're a member-driven organization, so we're an association, so we have members. So I'm always thinking on who our members are, what are their needs, and for those who are ready to make that transition to maybe going from someone who's got a job but also does music, to make that transition to just doing music, what do they need to do to do that leap? Or someone who is already there, but they want to go to, they want to tour more, they want to go to. So I think it's our responsibility to help those folks, those artists, be able to do that. And it's not always easy, because not every artist has a different path. And especially with today, a lot of those paths were cut short, or just, where some artists had, they just released an album, they had a whole plan, and then all of a sudden that just falls to shambles, and everything has to be either restarted or just thrown out the window, or so it's a really difficult time now. But I think I guess I have a position of leadership where I have to kind of provide some sort of vision of where the organization needs to be going, following where maybe the industry needs to be going, or following the industry. It's like, oh, this is where the industry seems to be going, well, let's try to go there. But it's a tough role, especially for in these days where I'm trying to think back to 2008 when I started. Things were quite different, social media was starting to, but it's today's artists putting out an album is not putting out an album the same way as they did back then.
No.
And so it's important for me to always be listening. It's kind of a interesting parallel to the music.
I was going to say, it helps that as a musician, as in your role with Music New Brunswick, being a musician, you understand a lot more than just somebody that is good at being in a managerial role that has nothing to do with music.
Absolutely, yeah, you're totally right. And I think that's one of the things that when I came into my role, a lot of folks appreciated. They knew that I was a musician that had been working as working with my band, doing a lot of different things within the industry, being involved in a lot of things. So I think that helped folks understand that, I think this is someone who can lead the organization that at the time in 2008 was in a pretty rough situation. We were over $100,000 in debt. And it's like, anyway, that's old news, because that's not the case now. Yeah. But I think that's the thing that I hope that folks have a feeling that I understand what maybe hopefully what their needs are, or where how we can help.
So looking to when COVID is going to kind of, I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think we're going to just learn how to live with it better. What do you see as far as Music New Brunswick and the members coming on the other side? How are they gonna? Because everyone's going to be clamoring to get out of the gate and go back to shows and kind of doing things the way it used to be. How would you? What would be your advice on how to approach that? Because it's going to be thin ice for a little while.
Well, I think the approach will be and this is, it's funny to say, but it's a lot of the same things that we say before. It's like, plan it. Like if you want to do something, if you're going to build a house, are you just going to go to the hardware store and buy a bunch of stuff and come back and try something? No, you're going to think it out. You're going to plan it ahead. You're going to build your foundation. You're going to have the right tools. You're going to have the right materials. And I think when we come out of the like you say, we're going to have to learn to live with COVID, but touring will come back. I'm hoping that artists will, and folks that want to work in the industry, because we need a lot more of those people. We have a lot of artists, but we don't have a whole lot of people that work in the industry that will, think about what they want to do and why they want to do it, and to who are they trying to connect with. And there are a lot of those kinds of connections that can happen without even leaving their hometown. Those specifically are things that I think that we'd like to develop. Like, okay, how can we get our artists who will produce music here and play locally, regionally, and nationally, internationally, all that stuff. But how can we develop more skills and aptitudes on how to get our music out there on different platforms, and getting people to listen, and getting their music on playlists, getting their music not only on playlists for Spotify, which don't pay really. I mean, but getting on playlists and getting opportunities that actually will create revenue streams, because they do exist and they're out there. And so it's getting artists savvy on, okay, if I'm going to release an album, it doesn't make sense just to upload it to Bandcamp and post it on a couple of, on my social media, and my friends and family will come and see, but that's, it'll kind of end there. It's being strategic. It's like, okay, if I have a record, this is the lifespan of my new album, so I have to really milk that for everything it's got, and do it right. And there are models out there that work, that artists have used before. So it's doing some research, and that maybe that's a role that Musique MB can play, is that, you want to tour, you want to play shows, great, we're going to help you try to find ways of doing that. But there are a lot of other ways that you can get your music out there, and you can create some revenue streams around that. So right now, that's where my headspace is. It's like, okay, where how can we provide some information, some workshops, some educational type things, where if you have a record, hey, these are the things that you could do to monetize it, and to get the best bang for your buck, and get as many people listening to that record as possible.
Yeah, because when an album comes out, you've got about 8 or 9 months before it takes that dip, before the attention starts to go away, and then you've got to find another way to bring people back in if you don't have something new coming out.
It depends on the market too. I mean, if you present it to a certain market, it's got a peak and it comes down. But you can really, you can have a look at what are the different markets you want to be sending it to. If you're thinking of the local market, let's say just regionally here in the Maritimes, well, that's kind of one strategy. If you want to try to hit campus radio across Canada, well, that's another kind of strategy. Or if you do a little bit of research and you see that, okay, well, these are the bands that we really like and that we connect with, and there's a similarity there, well, their fans will probably find that too. So, this is a band I didn't really know of, but they're in Korea. It's like, okay, how can we approach the Korean market? So obviously, if you have an album that's 2 or 3 years old, that there's a shelf life to that to a certain degree. So you're right. I think, I've heard 6 to 18 months. 18 months I can include the touring cycle and the full cycle. There are different ways of looking at it. I mean, there are some folks that instead of releasing an album, they could have 5 songs in the can, but they're going to release them in a certain way that they're going to stretch that out over 2 years, right? So there are different strategies, and I think that's something that every artist should have. So have a look at what's been done and who's doing what, and be very, very attentive on who's having success.
Yeah.
There's a reason why a certain artist is putting out singles instead of an album, and having a look at national charts and seeing, okay, who's doing what and nationally. And it's a lot of work. It's I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think that's something that we're looking into. It's like, okay, how can we get our artists to get out there without leaving their hometown?
Yeah. Because like you said, with you guys have the recording and you get the video and stuff, so that the cross media platforms, that's something because of COVID, all the people doing live streams and doing a lot more of that. Like I know Les Moon Tunes did that show from the moon, which was just mind boggling. But that's another way of creating content that'll have a shelf, not a shelf life, but just it keeps you more in the eye of the public.
Yeah, and it's not everyone who has the capacity of doing that. Obviously, if you're a band compared to a solo artist, it's a lot easier to do if you're just, you have your phone, but you have some software and you have some ideas. You have to be inventive, and the content is a big thing, and keeping that content flowing, and it's not always easy, but in 2 years it might be a completely different show here.
I expect it to be. Yeah, that's the thing with technology and with just everything, just as it goes. Like what we're doing now is going to be ancient, but in a few years time. So and you have to have your finger on the pulse on and what, like you say, like knowing what the trends are and what the industry and where it's going, and how to better prepare. And I think that's what Music New Brunswick's role, in helping the members is the reality of the situation. Yeah.
It's definitely part of what we want to do. Giving opportunities, but also trying to bring in experts that have that knowledge, that have that experience on how to do certain things, and also getting feedback from our members. It's like, once in a while we'd like to receive this more often. Like, but people send us ideas like, oh, I just saw this great video or this great thing. Like, it'd be cool to learn how to do that, or what made this special. And there are some folks that have done some pretty cool things even locally. Like there's an artist, I think his name is Roderick Porter, and he at one point really put a lot of emphasis on his Instagram stories. And I don't know if he went towards TikTok, but at one point he just got a lot of followers, but it's in the way he was doing it. And if you look at his Spotify stats and what he's doing on Instagram, it's phenomenal how many people are following. And it's just because it was his strategy. It's the way he approached it, and it worked.
Knowing how to use the platform.
Knowing how to use the platform and doing it right, doing it in a certain way. And the music, if the music's there, obviously that helps.
Talent does come into play.
And we talk about technology and all that, it's important and everything, but I think live is you still have to be players. You still have to be passionate about what you do. And I think that transcends everything. There's a reason why something jumps out from the screen. It's because it's good.
Yeah. Like it's one thing to be really good on Instagram during those 15 seconds versus being able to play an hour-long show. That's two totally different worlds, right? And you're not editing and finding that best 15 seconds that you did.
No, you still need to. For me, you still need to be a player. You still need to be able to have that capacity of going in front of people and play your music.
And again, with back to the conversation, the band on stage is having a conversation with the people that are watching, and they get that energy and that back and forth, which, like you say, live is never going to go away. It's just taking a break because of current situation, but it will definitely come back because people need that. They need that emotional release, whether it's from the stage or towards the stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of Instagram, I see on your Instagram that you're an avid Tolkien.
Oh yeah.
So how many times do you read the books in a year?
Well, I try to make sure that I don't. I have an interesting timeline when it comes to Tolkien. Um, I read Lord of the Rings when I was like 20 years old, and I went, "Wow, cool." A lot of stuff I didn't understand or didn't have the context. A lot of things that aren't really explained, but sort of, but not.
Yeah.
So put that away. Fast forward to 2001, the movies come out. Wow, cool movies. Yeah, awesome. Then read The Hobbit and was like, okay, that, and then more time goes by. So we're like in the early, maybe 2010, 12. I decided like, oh, I know this Silmarillion was something, heard about it. Knew it was a difficult read. Bought it at the time. There was a used bookstore near Aberdeen, Folio used books. They had an old used copy. Bought it, read it. I had the Tolkien, the Atlas of Middle Earth beside me, which helped immensely. Read it. It was dense, but I got through it. Going back in the index to read. Okay, who is this person? Who is this elf? Okay, going, and then. So I've read the Silmarillion 3 times.
Wow.
I've read, and then last year I reread the Lord of the Rings for a second time. So I've only read it twice.
Same.
But the second time I read it last year, I had this back knowledge of having read the Silmarillion and the Hobbit and Unfinished Tales. Unfinished Tales? Yes.
Yeah. That was by his son, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it's basically
all his manuscripts. Yeah.
Exactly. But the one, because there's Lost Tales and there's Unfinished Tales. That's right. So there's so Unfinished Tales. I read again. I read twice as well, and so when I reread The Lord of the Rings, I had this backstory of all the things that I needed to know when they're making reference to all those things in the book, in the songs and the poems.
Yeah.
I understood what they were saying finally. So and so yeah, I'm a bit of a not just a bit, I'm a very, very much of a Tolkien geek.
Yeah.
I'm currently trying to make my way through the History of Middle Earth, which is a 12-volume mammoth, and it's very, and it's all the transcripts, it's all the manuscripts. It's like, okay, it started with this and then it changed to this and then the final version is this.
Right.
So they go all down that road, and so I'm really hyped about the Amazon series that they've been talking about, right?
Yeah. They've recently moved it from New Zealand to London.
I saw that.
People are very worried about that because the part of the whole thing with the movies was that New Zealand aspect of not just the environments, but the filmmaking in general, like the people that are from there that make the movies. Like, I don't know how many times I've watched the movies and the special features, and that always is what kind of grabbed me, was how personal it was for them when they made it. And I don't know if the Amazon series will have that because of the move.
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation about the Amazon, like how they've changed. There's some people that came on board and they're no longer there. Like I know that Tom Shippey, who's a one of many Tolkien scholars, and he was involved in the first series, I do believe. And when I saw he was going to be part of the second series or this new series, I was like, yes, Shippey's there. And I don't think he's there anymore. So it's like, I wonder why. There's a lot of, it could be really bad or it could be all right. I'm hopeful. When they released that one image, I think a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, just that one image where you see a person and in the background a city and then a tree, one of the trees of Valinor. Right there, it's like, okay, they're going to be talking about the first age, that's for sure. It's probably going to be in the prologue, I assume. It's like they did with the movies, they kind of did a prologue and talked about the end of the second age, and so it's like, I think it's going to be that. We'll see. If they talk about the trees, they're definitely going to see the trees be destroyed, I'm assuming as well. So Yeah, I'm not a collector in the sense that I won't collect a lot of different versions of the books. Like I like having the books. I
Yeah.
like having good, like nice versions of the
Weighty.
books.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like the hardcover versions of like, so that I really I really love the books I have, and I don't reread them too often because I don't want to get them, I don't want to be too I want to feel the same kind of same way every time I come to certain passages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. So which would be your favorite book out of that?
Right now, I'm a very big fan of the Silmarillion. I love the backstory. I think once I'm going through a podcast right now, which is called the Prancing Pony podcast. Anyone who loves Tolkien and loves philology, because they talk a lot about the language and how Tolkien created all the languages and all the words and all the names. So it's an awesome podcast. I'm catching up to them, basically.
They have a lot of episodes.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of episodes, and they're going through the whole Legendarium. So they started at the beginning. They went through the Silmarillion, they went through the Hobbit, and now they're at the part of the story where Isengard has just been sacked, and Pippin has just looked into the Palantir, and it's like, oh, we gotta get out of here. Yeah. So that's where they're at, but that's where I'm at. Where they are, I'm not sure where they are, but anyway, yeah. I'm catching up to them slowly. But I think the book that still resonates with me the most right now is the Silmarillion, and I have a tradition that I started about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we built an add-on to the house, and we have a wooden stove now. So every year we get a bunch of wood that's delivered. And so part of my tradition is that while I'm cording that wood, I'm listening to an audiobook of the Silmarillion.
Okay. Yeah, I've yet to read the Silmarillion. I probably really should. I was listening to a podcast. The name is escaping me now. Oh shoot, it's these two sisters that are going through, and she's explaining the history, because she's like the book nerd, and then the other sister's the movie nerd. So they talk about the differences between the movie and the books.
Yeah.
I think it's called Speak, Friend, and Enter, maybe.
Okay.
Anyway, and I think they stopped making them, so I kind of fell out, because now that I've seen the dates when they were posting the podcast, the last one was like almost over a year ago. So I'm like, okay, well, they stopped. So what's the point of continuing with it, right? So but the Prancing Pony is one I was going to check out, because I recently seen that Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd sent them a message congratulating them on their podcast, because they have their own podcast now with the Friendship Onion. Have you checked their podcast out?
I've only seen bits. I haven't listened to the full version.
It's full on foolery. Yeah. But you can clearly see that they are best mates, and that they really are Merry and Pippin in life, like just really, the way that they go on together. You should check it out. It's pretty good.
I will.
They were talking with a string theorist today, talking about
a string theorist.
Yeah. Oh man, it's just the science behind all that, like in the multiverses, and so they have some interesting guests, and they bring cast members from the head Sean Astin and Elijah Wood and stuff like that. So it's a good time. Anyway,
one thing that I find that I'm trying to do, what I tried to do when I read the Lord of the Rings not long ago, is I tried to it's not difficult, not easy to do, is to get the actors out of your head while reading. When reading Gandalf or Frodo, it's like, I don't want to, I love the movies, but and it took me a while, but I think I was able to. And what's interesting about the Silmarillion is that there's none of that. What's difficult, and if you ever do, I would really, you're going to have to go back and forth to the index in the back, saying, okay, they named some person, or who is this person? Oh yeah, okay, come back and but once you kind of grasp a hold of that, the story is so massive, and it's like a history. It's the history as told by the elves. It's basically, it's a story. And
so in reading it, you kind of have to approach it in a scholarly fashion. Like
almost.
it's not a leisurely read.
No.
Yeah.
Very little dialogue. And a lot of names. And sometimes one person will have like 3 or 4 names. It's like, okay, sort of like in Mithrandir and the Gandalf, that's easy, you know.
So being a big vinyl collector, what would be, I guess you probably already answered this earlier with your desert island, but what would be your most prized vinyl?
I got a couple, I'd say. Not prized in terms of value or what they are.
No, what they mean.
What they mean. Okay.
Yeah.
That's easy.
Monetarily doesn't. Yeah. That's here nor there. But yeah, what is, as for you personally, what does it mean?
One album that had a huge influence and still continues is Introducing by DJ Shadow. That album and it came out in 97, I think, or 6. Just the textures, the grooves, the mix of old and new, the musicianship, even if he was playing with either a Kai pad or playing samples, you know, and you just hear the musicianship, even if it's not a band playing. And you hear the textures and the moods and the artist at work, and bringing all those things together. So that's an album that still to this day I can listen to. It's like a desert island disc. The Beatles were a big part of my childhood. So when I listened to the White Album, I still get a lot of pleasure with that, and listening to the new mix by Giles Martin, the son of George Martin, is pretty trippy, where it's the same album but not quite. So that's really cool. There are a lot of albums, that's funny, that were like parts of my childhood without knowing what they were, and then later going, oh, that's what that is. Like, you know, like Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd. I have memories of listening to Shine On You Crazy Diamond, but not knowing that what it was kind of in the background, you know, as a kid. Maybe I was like 5 years old, but like much later, kind of listening back to parts of that album for the first time, like in the late 80s, early 90s, and having a moment like, I know this. Like, you know, it's like one of those like finding
everything
an old
comes
lost
back.
friend.
Right.
Yeah, meeting an old friend, you know, that's come back 10, 15 years later. It's you know, there are some albums that still resonate strangely. Well, not strangely. It's like, okay, well, when I listen to some Mr. Bungle, it still kind of freaks me out. It's like, wow, this is, you know, it still inspires me. So if I had to make a top 10 list of albums, it'd be very eclectic, but I think it would span a lot of, you know, with all these albums, which goes from the Goldberg variations of Glenn Gould to California, Mr. Bungle, White Album, Introducing, Hemispheres of Rush. And, you know, I think it would by having those 10 albums, I think I think I'll be okay with this, you know.
I'm good. See you later.
Yeah, it's like, you know, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. And yeah, I think it's tough to, I've never actually narrowed it down to 10 albums, but I think I have a good solid 6 or 7 that I think wouldn't budge.
Yeah, cool. Some quick fire questions. So would you prefer cake or pie?
Pie.
Nice. That's okay, good. Potato or tortilla chips?
Potato.
Okay. Book or movie adaptations?
Oh, I'd say book, although there've been awesome movie adaptations, but I'd say book.
Yeah. Did you see Dune yet?
Not yet.
Oh,
I haven't read the book. I'm actually doing it now.
yeah.
I'm reading. I've never read the book, so I'm reading it now.
Okay. I wouldn't
Yeah.
hold off on going to the theater though,
No, I'm definitely going to go to the theater. Like I know
because I
this.
haven't read it yet either. I'm
I
about to
had
read it, but
I had the comic book adaptation of the Lynch film.
yeah.
So it was like so that's how I got to know the story and was able to dive a bit more into
Yeah.
the story. So yeah,
Hi-hat or ride cymbal?
ride.
Good. We have a lot in common.
Right.
What's the thing you're most proud of?
After my kids and my family, putting music at the center of all my decisions, of everything I do professionally. One thing that I went to university in music. I studied music, and when I knew I wasn't going to make a career in playing percussion unless I would get to the master, master degree and go to a university and teach there. I always said, well, whatever I do, music's involved. That's what's important. So if it's coiling cables at the end of a show, if it's creating a website for a band, or if it's promoting a show, or if it's working in a studio or working for a nonprofit for music, the fil conducteur and everything I do is music. So I think that's something that I've always said that I'd always want, that has to be this at the center of all my decision making professionally, and I'm pretty proud to have always kept that promise to myself.
Awesome. And last but probably the most important question: best place to get a coffee in Moncton or Dieppe?
My office.
No, I need to know so that next time I go to Moncton, I can get a good cup, because it's hard to find.
Yep. No, you're right. Okay. Well, that's I'm a big coffee fan. So I like the coffee from Kodiak. Like I buy the beans from them. Kodiak.
The Down East coffee.
Cafe. Yeah, Down East.
We have that here at Mill Cove.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mill Cove. That's an excellent spot. I'd say Café C'est la Vie on Main Street.
Okay, I'll have to try that. I haven't been in there yet.
Yeah,
last time we went, we tried a coffee at the Tide and Boar, just on the corner by the Green Market. It was okay. Yeah,
there's a place that I'm looking forward to trying, because I have some tickets. It's called Epic Coffee. It's right next to where La Guitare used to be, and there's Jean Coutu in front of like a. It's an old building, but it's like you need to make an appointment, but it's like a coffee tasting. It's like really it's like a sit down and we're going to give you an experience.
Okay. Wow.
So I haven't tried it. That's why I didn't name it, because I don't know if it, but I've heard really great things.
Okay.
But if
that's
you want
on St. George?
Yep. It's right beside where, where La Guitare used to be.
Yeah.
Well, just beside that, not where on the laundromat side, but the other side.
Okay.
It's called Epic, EPOCH, Epic Coffee.
Epoch, like epoch, like
like
the beginning of an
right
age.
Here. Yeah. I've got it right here. I just have to use it. I got it for my birthday, so it's Epic tasting.
Yeah, epoch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that word in history class.
Yeah.
like in Lord of the Rings, like the different ages. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
It all comes back.
It comes back. Yeah. Everything revolves around Tolkien.
Yes, I agree.
Well, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Andre.
I think this has been one of my favorite chats so far. Not
Cool.
to say anything bad about the other guests, because they've all been interesting conversations. But you and I had met very briefly when Musique New Brunswick had the Festival 506 in Miramichi. You were running around being busy, and rightfully so. So you didn't have time to just talk with everybody. But we had a brief how are you kind of conversation, and I didn't want to get in your way. So, but this is the first time that we've actually had to interact and have a real conversation, and it feels like I've known you for a long time.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it was a great conversation, and we had a lot of really interesting. I don't know, a lot of. We were able to dig a little bit deeper than usual. I like that.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and I hope people get to learn more about your story and your background, and kind of see you in a different light as being the director at Musique in Brunswick, because you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, what an awesome conversation. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit nervous before going into this. He and I had only had a very brief meeting when Festival 506 was in the Miramichi. So we didn't have a whole lot of interaction, a few, likes and comments on Facebook, here and there, but not an actual sit-down conversation. I mean, he's one of the most important people in the music industry in New Brunswick, but he's just so chill, so down to earth. I thank you so much, Jean, for all the stories and everything that you talked about, and being so open. Probably one of my favorite conversations, just because I wasn't expecting it. And I'm very grateful for him to have agreed to be on the podcast, and I look forward to many more interactions. Again, thank you so much. As always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be kind. Until next time. Let